Jay Hewitt had already beat the odds once with a successful brain surgery. Then a year later, he was hit with a terminal diagnosis of brain cancer. Jay could have lost heart, but instead he cried out to God, trained for the Ironman, and learned that anything is possible with God.
I felt dazed. I felt like I got hit by a punch that came out of nowhere.
In 2017, Jay Hewitt kept asking himself, why me? After a doctor gave him a sobering diagnosis. He had a tumor the size of a ping pong ball in the center of his brain.
There was something in me that didn't want to tell my wife. I didn't want to be in a position of weakness. Always from the beginning of our marriage, had seen myself as a protector, as the one that needs to be strong for the family. And so that was a very scary step, to let someone in and let someone support me.
With the tumor infecting the central part of Jay's brain, the only possible cure required a high-risk surgery. After multiple surgeons declined to operate on Jay, Dr. Mitchell Berger agreed to perform the surgery. To lower the risks, he advised that it would be best to cut out the infected brain tissue while Jay was fully conscious.
When he told me that I was going to need to remain awake for it, I freaked out. I went white as a ghost, because what went through my mind is, what if I have a panic attack while on the table, while awake? I felt like I was going to be living in a horror film. I knew if I just left this tumor in there, it would become cancerous and my life would dramatically be cut short. It wasn't a question of whether or not I was going to do the surgery. It was, will I do it awake or asleep?
After much prayer, Jay agreed to stay awake during the surgery. For 2.5 hours, Jay prayed for a miracle as he listened to the sounds of surgical tools removing pieces of his brain tissue.
All that I see is my wife. I knew my brain was working correctly. I could understand her, I could see her, I could comprehend what was happening. And she says to me, Jay, they got it all. They got the entire tumor. It was like Natalie was announcing to me that the hand of God was with the hand of my surgeon and did beyond what a human hand could do, even a top surgeon. I felt, I'm safe.
Jay's sense of safety was shattered 1 year later when he had another seizure. The doctor diagnosed him with terminal brain cancer.
I felt like I had a death sentence. I was so confused because up to that point, everything was going right. It seemed like God was in it and making things happen and delivering miracles, and now, why? At that moment, I felt like I'd been dropped. I felt abandoned by God.
As Jay wrestled with his faith, God directed him to the passage in 2 Corinthians, where Paul asked the Lord to take away the thorn in his flesh. And God answered, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness."
And I concluded, well, I'm weak right now. I'm the weakest I've ever been. And if I'm weak, then I'm strong. I got this sense that not only would God be demonstrating his power through my weakness, this is going to give me the opportunity to learn what strength is and to learn what weakness is. I had this crazy, it was an insane idea. What if I do something that I never dreamed possible? What if I did Ironman, this 140-mile triathlon? I told my daughter I was doing this in her honor. I want to teach her that when we're weak, we're actually strong. And I thought, I can tell her these things, or I can show her. And I thought, what better way than Ironman?
After a second brain surgery, Jay embarked on a brutal year-long training while he received chemo. Fear of failure haunted Jay as he trained alone.
Running, swimming, cycling, every one of those disciplines, as I was working up in those areas, I came to a point where I'm like, I can't do this. And I'd pray, God, help. And every time, in every discipline, he would give me strength by sending someone else. And I realized what he was doing is he was taking this young man who thought independence is strength and self-sufficiency is strength. And he was reshaping it to say relationship is strength. And with people bearing your burdens, you can go a lot further than you can on your own.
Early in 2020, Ironman canceled all races due to the pandemic. But as a sponsored Ironman athlete, the organization presented Jay with a unique opportunity. To run a virtual Ironman, Jay would have to map out the course himself, and he would need the help of his community to make it a reality.
God had been working on my soul, and I'd become more comfortable with accepting help. And so now to have all these people show up to support me, instead of it making me feel weak and pathetic, it made me feel loved. I was concerned that the chemotherapy that I'd been experiencing would cause cramps. I thought, man, if I cramp up, there's no way I could do 140 miles. And yet at the same time, there's a piece going into the race where I'm not overcome with fear.
For 14 grueling hours, Jay rested in the Lord's strength as he swam, cycled, and ran 140 miles back home to his wife and daughter.
I remember pulling into my neighborhood and turning onto my street, and my friends are all lined the streets on both sides. There's hundreds, and I'm running through this passageway of support. And right behind the finishing tape is Natalie and Hero. And once I saw that, everything else went to a blur, and it's like I floated to them. And I crossed the finish line, and I had this overwhelming sense of mission accomplished. When I got down on one knee and I said to Hero, I said, honey, if I can do it, you can do it, because anything is possible with God. If it's possible to cross the Ironman finish line at my weakest, it's possible for God to do whatever He wills in my life. The understanding that I have now is that we're all weaker than we ever want to admit. But if we do, then we become stronger than we could ever imagine. I don't know how this is going to end, but I'm confident that He can do the impossible.
Wow, I don't think I've ever heard of a more amazing testimony in my life. I mean, Jay's story is absolutely miraculous, nothing short of miraculous. For him to run a triathlon, to train for an Ironman triathlon while undergoing chemotherapy, talk about someone who literally took God at His word, and the results are absolutely astounding. The fact that he ran, he swam, he trained in honor for his daughter, but trusted in the word that God gave him, that my power is made strong in your weakness. And we're all weak, and we all need God's strength. And God wants us to take Him at His word. He is faithful. Miracles can happen. The impossible can happen when we take God at His word. And so I'm just amazed at what God can do when we take Him at His word. Things change. Things that normally could never happen change when we take God at His word. And we want to take God at His word with you today. We, Gordon and I, we want to pray for whatever needs you may have. And we want you to take to heart what God is saying through that story, that He can do anything. There's nothing He cannot do. You may not be facing brain cancer or anything like that, but whatever needs you have, we want you to trust that, you know what? Father, your word says that your power is made perfect in my weakness.